A man is kneeling on the coast of southern India. It is approximately 72 AD. He is 500 miles from the city where he grew up. He walked most of it, past Parthia, past the Indus Delta, down the western coast through mountains and river crossings, through regions where nobody spoke his language and nobody had heard of the teacher he was talking about. He is alone when they find him. This man had a specific condition for belief. He had stated it plainly, in front of witnesses years earlier. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, I will not believe. Physical evidence or nothing. He got what he asked for. We don't know exactly what he saw. We only know what he did with it. He went east, past every place he knew, all the way to a coastline that no one from his world had ever mapped. At roughly the same moment, Peter is in Rome. Andrew is in Greece. James, son of Zebedee, is already dead, executed in Jerusalem 14 years earlier. Matthew is somewhere in Ethiopia or Persia. Bartholomew is in Armenia. 11 men, 11 cities, 3 continents. 11 of the 12 died rather than stop talking. 1 survived, exiled to a prison island, still writing at the age of 80. This is what actually happened to them. Disciple means student. Every rabbi in first century Judea had disciples. It was an ordinary arrangement. Apostle is different. The Greek word is apostolos, one who is sent out. In the ancient world, an apostle carried the full legal and social authority of the person who sent them. You treated the apostle as you would treat the sender. The message was the sender. That's the title Jesus gave them. Not students, envoys. The group he assembled to carry that authority was, by any political measure of the time, impossible. Matthew was a publicanus, a Roman tax contractor. That meant he sat at a booth on a road in Capernaum and collected tolls on fish coming off the lake, on goods moving between territories, on people crossing checkpoints. The booth smelled like dust and animal sweat and bronze coins that had been handled by too many people. He was allowed to charge whatever the market would bear. Everything above the required amount he kept. Jewish law declared him ritually unclean because of his constant contact with Gentiles. His own community considered him a collaborator with an occupying army. That is not a metaphor. That is what the word meant. Simon was a zealot. The Zealots were not a political party. They were an organized resistance movement dedicated to the violent removal of Roman rule from Israel. Think of the French Maquis in World War II, fighters who believed that collaboration with the occupier was not just wrong, but punishable by death. The Sicarii, a faction within the Zealots, carried concealed daggers and used them on Roman collaborators. In first century Judea, people like Simon killed people like Matthew. Jesus put them in the same room. He gave them the same assignment. And then there were the fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, working men from Galilee. Acts 4:13 describes Peter and John before the Sanhedrin, the 71, man Supreme Court and Senate of Judaism combined, and the council recognized them as unschooled, ordinary men. They had probably never traveled more than 30 miles from their village before any of this started. Judas Iscariot was likely different. Iscariot almost certainly comes from Thas Ish, Kerioth, man of Kerioth, a town in Judea, south of Jerusalem. If that's correct, he was the only non-Galilean in the group. He kept the money. He may have been the most educated man among them. Philip asked the question everyone has always wanted to ask. Bartholomew's first reaction to Jesus was pure skepticism. James, son of Alphaeus, is barely mentioned in the historical record, and Thaddaeus, also called Jude, whose name was Judas, and who spent the rest of his life being clarified from the other one, a tax collector, a militant, 4 fishermen, a treasurer who would become the most infamous traitor in history, and 6 others. These were the people. James, son of Zebedee, was the first to die. Acts 12:2. Direct, no elaboration. King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. That is it. 2 sentences. The first apostle executed, and the text barely slows down. Josephus corroborates the political context. Herod Agrippa, I was executing Christians in this period as a political move to win Jewish favor. The date is approximately 44 AD, 14 years after the crucifixion. The people who watched James die were people who had known Jesus personally. A few years before his death, James and his brother John had approached Jesus with a request. They wanted the seats at his right hand and his left in the kingdom, the best positions. Jesus looked at them and said, "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" In Aramaic, drinking the cup meant accepting the fate. Whatever was coming, take it. They said yes. They didn't know what they were agreeing to. James drank it first. He was the first one in. Peter died in Rome, almost certainly under Nero, sometime between 64 and 68 AD. Clement of Rome wrote about Peter's death around 96 AD, within the lifetime of people who had known Peter directly. He describes Peter enduring not one or two but many labors before his death. Tertullian, writing around 200 AD, is explicit Peter was crucified upside down. The reason given in the tradition. Peter said he was not worthy to die in the same position as Jesus. He asked to be inverted. Vatican excavations in the 1940s and 1950s found a 2nd century shrine and vase Aedicula directly beneath the high altar of St. Peter's Basilica. The Depositio Martyrum, a burial calendar from 354 AD, places Peter's death site there. The physical memory of where he died was maintained continuously for 3 centuries before anyone built a church over it. Peter was the man who denied Jesus 3 times in a courtyard on the night of the arrest. He swore he didn't know him. He said it 3 times. He then went outside and wept. 25 years later, in Rome, with Nero's executioners in front of him, he did not say it again. Same man, same voice. If this is landing, hit likey right now. That tells the algorithm to bring this in front of someone who's been carrying these questions. And subscribe, because we are just getting to the story that nobody talks about. The man who doubted went the farthest. The man who survived had the hardest road. And the man whose name we still use as a synonym for betrayal. His story is more complicated than you've been told. Don't go anywhere. The strongest historical case for any apostle's travel, outside of Peter in Rome, is Thomas in India. The Acts of Thomas, a Syriac text written around 200 AD, tells a detailed story. Thomas is sold as a slave to an Indian merchant named Abanes, who is working for a king named Gondophares. Thomas eventually becomes this king's builder and missionary. Gondophares sounds like a name someone invented for a story. He wasn't. In the 19th century, archaeologists began finding coins in the region of modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. The coins bore the name of an Indo-Parthian king Gondophares. He reigned approximately 19 to 45 AD. The dates match the window of Thomas's mission. The location matches the tradition. The Acts of Thomas gets the king's name right. This is not common in ancient religious literature. Apocryphal texts routinely invent kings and places. The Acts of Thomas named a real one. Thomas traveled through Parthia, into northwest India, and then south, down the Malabar coast of what is now Kerala. The St. Thomas Christians, the Das Nazrani, trace their community to his arrival around 52 AD. They currently number approximately 4 million people. They predate European Christianity in India by over 1,500 years. They are still there. Thomas died at Mylapore, modern Chennai, on the southeastern coast of India, martyred by spear. 500 miles from Jerusalem. The man who demanded physical evidence before he would believe anything traveled farther than any of the others, to a country none of them had ever heard of alone, and did not come back. Andrew found Peter. That is his first action in the Gospel of John. He hears Jesus speak, follows him, and immediately goes to find his brother. John 1:4-1. He first found his own brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah." He brings Peter to Jesus. Without Andrew, there may be no Peter in the story at all. Origen, writing in the 3rd century and quoted by Eusebius, says Andrew went to Scythia, the region north of the Black Sea, which is modern Ukraine and southern Russia. He preached there. Then he moved west. He was crucified in Patras, Greece, around 60 AD, on an X-shaped cross. The tradition gives the same reason as Peter, not worthy of the same shape, a fisherman from a lake in Galilee. And by the end of his life, his route had covered Ukraine, Greece, and most of what is now Turkey. The saltire, the white X on blue that forms the Scottish national flag, is his cross. Scotland's patron saint died in Greece, having come from Ukraine, having started in Galilee. He found Peter. Then he kept going. At the Last Supper, Philip looked across the table at Jesus and then said, "Lord, show us the Father. That will be enough for us." That is the one request every human being has ever made, not the polite theological version, the actual one. Just show us, make it visible, show us God, and we will ask nothing else. Jesus' response was immediate. "Have I been with you so long, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." Either the most extraordinary claim any person has ever made, or the language of someone no longer in contact with reality. Nothing in between makes the sentence work. Philip was martyred in Hierapolis, in what is now Western Turkey. Eusebius confirms the location. Archaeological excavations in 2011 identified his tomb there. Bartholomew's first recorded words about Jesus were, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Pure skepticism. Nazareth was a village of no significance, not in any prophecy anyone recognized, not the home of any known teacher. Bartholomew said exactly what he thought. He went to Armenia. The tradition says he was flayed, his skin removed, and then crucified or beheaded. It is one of the most brutal deaths in the apostolic record. The Armenian Apostolic Church traces its founding to Bartholomew and Thaddaeus. It is one of the oldest surviving national churches in the world, established in the 1st century, continuously operating. It still holds services. The skeptic built something that has outlasted every empire that tried to destroy it. Matthew, the tax collector, wrote the most Jewish of the 4 Gospels. He quotes the Hebrew prophets more than Mark, Luke, or John. He uses the phrase, "that it might be fulfilled which was spoken through the prophet," 12 times. The man who spent his career extracting money from Jews on behalf of Rome spent the rest of his life making the case that a Jewish carpenter was the fulfillment of 1,000 years of Jewish prophecy. His exact death is uncertain. Ethiopian tradition says he died peacefully. Persian sources say he was martyred. We don't know. What we know is what he left behind. And then there is Thaddaeus, also called Jude. His given name was Judas, not that Judas. The Gospel of John marks the distinction explicitly at the Last Supper. Judas, not Judas Iscariot, said to him. John had to write that clarification. By the time John's Gospel circulated, that name had become impossible to use without the qualifier. Thaddaeus spent the rest of his life being that clarification. He was martyred, tradition says in Persia, alongside Simon the Zealot, axe or spear, depending on the source. Here is the question I want you to sit with. 11 men died for this, not for a belief they had received secondhand from a text, from a tradition, for something they personally claimed to have witnessed. People die for beliefs all the time. History is full of that. What is rare is this, a specific group of people across 3 continents maintaining a specific factual claim, a named person, a specific event, a specific place, while being individually executed, none of them in the same room, none of them able to coordinate a retraction. My take that distinction matters. Skeptics say collective delusion, social pressure, myth-making. I think that argument is harder to make than it looks. What do you think? Even if you disagree, especially if you disagree, tell me. I read every comment. The Greek word is martyria. It means witness. A martyr, in the original sense, was simply a person who gave testimony, the same word used in a legal proceeding. Someone who stands in front of a court and says, I was there. I saw this. This is what happened. The disciples called themselves witnesses, not believers, witnesses. The distinction matters more than it first appears. People die for beliefs every day. Religious conviction, political ideology. Nationalism, history is full of men and women who died for things they believed deeply but had not personally witnessed. That is not unusual. That is, in fact, common. What is unusual is dying for a specific historical claim. Not, I believe God exists, but I was in a room with a man who had been executed 3 days before, and he was standing there, and I touched him, and he ate food in front of us, and then he was gone. That is a different category of statement. It has a specific person, a specific event, specific physical details. It is either true or it is a lie. It cannot be a misunderstanding. And here is what makes the pattern strange. Peter was not in Jerusalem, surrounded by people who shared his conviction. He was in Rome, the capital of the empire that had killed his teacher, with no army, no political cover, no institutional protection. The easiest thing in the world would have been silence, not even a retraction, just quiet. He kept talking. Thomas died in India, 500 miles from anyone who shared his conviction. Andrew died in Greece. Bartholomew died in Armenia. None of them were in the same place. None of them could coordinate a story or reinforce each other's resolve in those final moments. Each of them, at the end, was alone. None of them recanted. This does not prove the resurrection. That is a separate question, one that depends on what you already believe about what is possible. But it does establish something about the nature of the testimony. These were not people dying for a tradition they had inherited. They were dying for something they personally claimed to have seen in the face of every pressure to simply stop saying it. John survived. This is interesting in its own ways. The longest living apostle, the one with the most time to reconsider, the one who watched all the others die. He kept writing. Revelation 1-90, I, John, your brother and companion in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos. He was 80 years old, in exile on a prison island when he wrote the word companion, still counting himself in. There is a story about John in his last years in Ephesus. He was too frail to walk on his own. His students carried him to the church gatherings on a chair. Every time they brought him in, he would say the same thing, little children, love one another. Every time. Just that sentence. His students eventually asked him why he kept repeating it. Why, after everything he had seen and written and survived, that was the one thing he kept saying. He said, it is the commandment of the Lord. If it alone is kept, it is enough. That is not theology. That is an old man who watched everyone he loved die for something and came out the other side with one sentence. He died in Ephesus around 100 AD, in his own bed, the only one. 30 pieces of silver. That is the price Judas received for handing Jesus over to the chief priests. Matthew 26:15. The chief priests counted it out, 30 silver coins, and Judas agreed. 30 pieces of silver was the price of a slave in Exodus 21:32. The prophet Zechariah, writing 5 centuries before Judas was born, had named that exact amount and had described what would happen to it afterward. Zechariah 11:13e. Throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. The priests, unable to return blood money to the temple treasury, used it to buy a potter's field for burying foreigners. 500 years before any of this happened, someone wrote down the amount and the destination. What happened to Judas after is the most honest moment of disagreement in the New Testament. Matthew 27:3 Judas was seized with remorse. He went back to the chief priests with the 30 coins and said, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood." They said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." He threw the coins down on the temple floor and left. Then he went and hanged himself. The priests collected the scattered coins and used them to buy the potter's field. Acts 1:18-19 tells it differently. Judas bought a field with the payment, fell headlong into it, and his body split open. 2 accounts, both in the canon, neither one smoothed over to match the other. The early church kept both. They had access to both. They did not harmonize them. They preserved them. This is either an oversight or the most honest thing in the entire collection. 2 communities, 2 memories, both put in writing, neither erased. The question theology has argued about for 2,000 years: did Judas have a choice? John 13:27, at the Last Supper, Jesus looks directly at Judas and says, "What you are about to do quickly." He knew. Did the betrayal have to happen? Was Judas a villain or a mechanism? Was there a moment where he could have turned around? The text does not answer this. 2,000 years of theology has tried. The text stays silent. The last recorded thing Judas did is this: he went back. He admitted it. "I have betrayed innocent blood." The priests dismissed him. He threw the money on the floor of the temple, the most sacred space in his world, and walked out. That is the last action of Judas Iscariot. He threw the money down and left. 50 days after the crucifixion, the same men who had locked themselves in a room and hidden were standing in the streets of Jerusalem making public claims about a resurrection. Not in a distant city, in Jerusalem, where the execution had happened, where the tomb was, where the guards were, where the authorities who had ordered the execution still held power. Peter stood up in front of a crowd and said, "The man you crucified is alive," and gave the location of the tomb, and described what the witnesses had seen. Nobody produced a body. Whether you believe the resurrection happened or not, that sequence requires an explanation. 50 days, the same people, the same city, a completely different posture. Something happened between the locked room and the public street. The debate across 20 centuries is about what? Subscribe. Next week, the women. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna, the ones who stayed at the crucifixion when the men had gone, the ones the earliest accounts name as the first witnesses, and the ones the Roman legal system did not consider valid testimony. Why does the resurrection story hinge on witnesses whose testimony couldn't be used in court? That episode is going to raise questions you haven't thought to ask yet. 3 things worth carrying out of this. First, the 12 were not assembled for agreement. A tax collector and a zealot. In normal life, on opposite sides of a real political conflict where one side killed the other. 4 fishermen who had never left their village. A doubter, a denier, a treasurer who betrayed the operation. Jesus did not build this out of people who had everything in common. He built it from people who had almost nothing in common except what they claimed to have witnessed. Second, the historical evidence for their deaths is not all the same weight. James, son of Zebedee, confirmed. Acts says it directly. Josephus corroborates the political context. The date matches. Peter in Rome. Strong. Clement of Rome writes within living memory. Tertullian adds the upside down detail. Archaeology marks the tomb. Thomas in India, supported by a historically verified king and a community that has existed for 2,000 years without interruption. Others, Matthew, Simon, Bartholomew, we have tradition, but no independent verification. Take it in proportion. The evidence is real. It is not all equal. 3 John, the last one standing, the only male disciple the Gospels place at the foot of the cross. He was there when Jesus died. He watched James die. He watched Peter die. He was exiled to Patmos. He kept writing. At 80 years old, on a prison island, he wrote the word, companion, your companion in the suffering, still in. After all of it, still in. We started in Madras, a man kneeling on the coast of southern India, a spear. 500 miles from the city, where he had stood in a room and set his conditions for belief. Show me the wounds, let me touch them, then I'll decide. He got what he asked for, or he claimed he did. We weren't there. What we know is what he did with it. He walked east past every border of the known world. He built something in Kerala that is still standing. And when they came for him at the end, on that coastline, he did not negotiate it, explain it, or back away from it. He was still going the same direction he had been going since the day he changed his mind. 11 men, 11 cities, 3 continents. One story. None of them changed it. Which of the 12 surprised you most? Tell me in the comments. I want to know which one you hadn't heard before. And share this with someone who's been asking these questions. They're not going to find this in Sunday school.